Welcome back to episode 2. Episode 2 is all about putting together the first part of the kart, which is the front. We start at the front with all the front components, the pedals, the stub axles, everything else to get all the front together. The reason I need to get the front together first of all, it's always good to start front to back, but also I'm taking the kart in a couple of days to go get the chassis jigged, and the guys over at Used OTK want me to have some of the front assembly put together to speed up their job and speed up their process. You will see that a little bit later in this video. So without any further ado, let's get going. First thing we're going to start with is the pedals, because that's the first thing that's got to go on. You basically can't build any of the rest of the kart without the pedals. So we're going to start with the pedals, and they're going to go straight on. Luckily, they slip slip on nice and easily into position. They slip on nice and easily because you've cleaned your kart. If you haven't cleaned your kart properly and you're finding things difficult going on, maybe go clean your kart and maybe go watch the last episode if you haven't got there first. So all we do is put these bolts in here. Grab a 4mm Allen key. Now don't do these up too tightly. They're not going to rattle loose or fall out because there's other things bolted in. But the heads on these are quite small and quite weak, but also the thread inside here is also quite weak. And if you ruin the thread in there, you're going to really struggle to fix the thread, and you might as well get a new set of pedals. So yeah, just hand tight until basically you start to get any resistance from the nut, from the bolt. Yeah, don't yank on it, because also if you ever need to take them off, you don't want it to be too difficult to get off. Pedals fitted, job done, start her up. No, I'm joking. After pedals, we then need to do the front bits of metalwork. So again, this goes on from one of my other videos. I've kept a lot of the nuts and bolts inside the parts that they come from, so I know what goes on and I know what is needed to go in. So you want this side that has the stop for where the throttle goes, so you want this on the right hand side, and they slip in nicely like that with a bit of a bash. Oh no, so I've already noticed that this bolt is slipping, so we are going to take this bolt out and we're going to replace it. Matching new bolt where the head isn't stripped, and that is going to go in the bin. Cool. Again, doesn't need to be super rigid because we've got to get other bits on. Nice little tip: mark out the spanners that you're going to use the most. So I have blue on all my 10mm and I have red on all my 13mm. If I had another colour one, I'd have put it on my 15mm as well, but I don't have any more tape. So, but yeah, colour these, it just makes them easier to just grab when you need them. So if you're ever unsure what nuts and bolts to buy, OTK, well, various websites, I'll put a link up here somewhere, do a kit you can buy. It comes in a little box. I got mine from Kartmania, and they're about 45-50 quid, but it has every single nut and bolt for the kart in it. So it's always worth buying one or maybe two of those if you're feeling flush, and then you just know you're covered for all the nuts and bolts you need for the kart. Oh well, what you can do if you are feeling flush is you buy flanged versions of these nuts. So for example, they're flanged on the end, so it basically has a built-in O-ring, so you can get away with using those. Need to put a stop to the video right there. I came across a mistake. As you'll see, I put the front bumper loop upside down. I definitely noticed this on my own, and it wasn't Ollie from Used OTK who told me when I was getting my kart jigged that it was upside down. I definitely noticed it on my own. So I've gone back and I fixed that, and the loop is now correct, as you'll see here. Right, so what you got here is the footrest. Now, the footrest is based on personal preference, but it's about where you should have it and whether you should have it backwards or forwards or how you should have it. So let's talk about how this is supposed to go in. So you want the footrest to bend in that way because that's what you want your feet to be resting up against. So for example, that wouldn't be correct. So you want it to be able to, your foot to sit in there and rest in there, because that's where you want to put your heel. If you have it that way, it feels awkward and it pushes you away from the pedal. So what we're going to do is we're going to take these out. These are all just all in finger tight. I just put them back together. Obviously all these little gold bits and stuff, and all the washers and all the spacers, all depends on how tall you are. So if you're short and you need the pedal and you need to come closer to you, you can put it within a few more of these in these holes. But it is one of those things you want to try and get right straight away, because this thing is an arse to get on and off once it's in. So you get that on there. I want to have mine a little bit further forward, but I guess you can position that in whatever way you want. That's why I'm going to have mine. Even though it can be done, it is a pain in the backside.
What I'm trying to get at here while I'm distracted at putting things together is trying to put the footrest on without the floor tray on is a real pain in the backside to do. So this is the best way to do it, which is just by putting it on without the floor tray on, and then it's done. And then we move on to the front torsion bar.
So what we're going to do now is we're going to put the torsion bar in. Okay, so the torsion bar goes here. So what you have is you have two settings for this torsion bar. The best way to figure out how you want this to go in, whether you want it set up for a stiff setting or a softer setting, is depending on how the bar is. The best way to remember that is what is the easiest way to bend this bar. That would be the easiest way to bend it if you bent it that way. If you try to bend it that way, it's much stiffer. So if you want a stiffer front end or a softer front end, you move this bar forward for stiff or flat for softer. Okay. As far as kart setup goes, mess about with it and see what works. Technically, having a softer front end will help the top front tires bite and take away some of that turn in. So I ran it soft all year because it gave me that front initial bite that I wanted. But if it starts to get wet, you would turn the torsion bar up to stiffen that front up. Okay, good. The way that goes on is you have this little bar thing. Now in that little bar, you have two different ends on it. So obviously that bit has a big circle end, so that goes on there, and this goes in the other end. So we're going to get those on now. For my kart, this is quite difficult to get on because I had the chassis painted last season by the brilliant Alex over at Powder Pro, but it's quite a thick coat of paint. So what I have to do is go get my big rubber mallet.
Something to remember when you're installing these things is obviously these components are magnesium. Anything that's gold is magnesium, and they are a soft metal, and then bolts that you screw into them are a harder metal. If you nip them up too tight, they will just absolutely tear off all the thread. So you just do them just until you start to feel some tension, and then you stop.
And that is your front torsion bar installed. Next. So what we have here is how the stub axles all go together. So you have a complete one here. So as you can see, you have the kingpin bolt that runs all the way through with a nut underneath. Then you have the camber and caster pill. Then you have this little washer, which basically acts as controlling the ride height. It goes through the stub axle itself. Then you have another one of these. Then you have a fat metal washer. Then you have another caster pill, and then the nut on the end. So things to note. These caster pills, they're exactly the same. Put them top and bottom, they will still do the same job. You haven't got to worry about which direction, which one goes where. They are the same. Then you get these little discs. As you can see, they've got a lip on the top, the washer in the middle, and another little lip that controls the ride height. So for example, if you wanted to raise the ride height, you would put both of these at the top. If you wanted to lower the ride height, you'd put both of these at the bottom. Thing to also note is you have here the kingpin, where the hole where the kingpin goes. If I give this a tap, as you can see, this little washer that is inside can move about. So if you're ever trying to get the kingpin in and it won't go in neatly, that is probably why. So you have to take it out, give it a knock, get the whole thing. What actually sometimes does it is you get that in, give it a wiggle, and then it goes through nicely. So you just got to be careful. So if you ever have resistance getting the kingpin into the stub axle, that's the reason why. So let's go put them on the cart. So this one is the left hand side. You can tell that because the OTK faces upwards on it, and obviously that faces inwards because that's what connects to your track rods. What we're going to do first is we're going to pop the caster pill in. So now what you want to do for initial setup is you want to set the caster, the camber and caster, at neutral. So if you can see here, I don't know if the camera is picking this up, there is a line here and a line here that lines up with these holes either side. Okay, and in there you put the little screws to go into here, which will hold it into place. So let's do that first. So the footage I had of showing how the caster pills go together wasn't very good because I had it on my head cam and it missed it off. So what we can see here is the top of the caster pill. So where you can see those two little lines, they have to go into the holes that they point at. When they point at that, that is the correct position for the neutral position for the camber and for underneath for the caster. You've then got the little pills, or the little screws, either side. Those little screws are tiny and very, very soft metal, so you have to be really careful when you screw those in, otherwise you will turn and round the heads, and then you've got to chop them off, which is obviously not a nice job. So please just bear in mind that's what you have to do with these pills, is just be very, very careful. So now I've got both the pills in, what we're going to do is we are going to attach the stub axle. So we take the kingpin through the top of the stub axle, and then we'll just rest it in there for now. We get one of these little washers, and there we go, slides nicely through. Now obviously not all the way in, we need to go get the other washer, put in the hole, line it up, through it goes. So I'm actually going to replace my kingpins because my kingpins are quite manky. So when I go to use the OTK in a couple of days to go get the chassis straightened, I'm going to have to do some purchasing from use OTK. So now that we've got that in and it's in position, we now need to tighten it up. We need a 17mm spanner and a 7mm Allen key. Now, when you buy a normal Allen key set, they do not come with one of these in it. What you have to do is buy what is basically a brake Allen key. So this I get from Halfords, and yeah, it's only a few quid, but it doesn't come in a standard Allen key set when you buy something like this or something like this load of hex keys that I've got here. All right. Again, doesn't need to be super tight because you still want it to have some movement in it, and that is that done nicely. What we're going to put in now is this bit, which holds up the Nassau panel. Has to go in a correct way, so it has to go in facing that way, like that, because then the Nassau panel rests on top, and that goes in that way correctly. So get some bolts, feed them through with plenty of washers. You might need to treat this as a bit of an adjustable device because you might have to pack out the spacers and put the bolts in particular positions to attach to the Nassau panel correctly. So just be mindful of that when you have that, when you're putting that together. So the first time you put it on, when you start it like this, it might not go on straight away and you'll have to fiddle around with it to get it right. There is a full kit that you can buy for the type of Nassau panel which I have, which is the KG 008, whatever it's called, but I have the standard pack and have to bodge it in. If you are racing MSA, you have to have the correct kit. You can't run it like this, so you have to talk to your local supplier about having the actual correct metalwork. at GX, we're not covered by MSA, so we don't have to run to those strict regulations. Another part of the reason that GX is so good, because it helps keep all the costs down. So now that is in the right position. So now we're going to put the steering column in. So to put the steering column in, we first have to put the steering column bearing in first, which requires using a pair of these, which are circlet pliers. So let's get to that. This is what the steering column bearing looks like, and it goes in here. But as you can see, if you just try and push it in, it falls out. That's why you get one of these, which is called a circlet. So you have to go underneath the cart, use your circlet pliers to pull it in, to get it in the right place, and then you release it. And it is as simple as that. And now that isn't going anywhere. Just push around just to click. There you go. Hear the click as it went in. So now that is now not going anywhere. That is now the bearing for your steering column in. If you want to see a more detailed video of me pulling that out, I have that in my stripped down video, which I'll tag in the video here, and you can go and have a look at that in a bit more detail. So now we're going to put the steering column in. Got to put the steering column in the right way. When I first built my car, I put the steering column in the wrong way around. This bit has to point down easily, just slides. Oh, make sure the bearing is in straight, pop that into the bearing, and that is where your steering column sits. Now, before you go and tighten it up and go and tighten the nut up, we want to get this into the right position. Now, I made a little mark on here before I took all this apart to make sure I put it back in the right place, because it's where I particularly like the steering column to be, which means the steering wheel's not too loose, not too stiff, and is just right for me. So first thing I need to do is undo this little grub screw here. Again, with grub screws, just be careful. Whoa! More about not turning them, because if you turn them, they'll never ever come out again.
So with the metalwork, it just goes straight through the chassis, then through the red block, then through the other side of the chassis, and then you do it up, so it all connects as one complete unit. Then you do up the little black collet, which holds everything else in place. That's a safety precaution, you have to have that in place. And then you go underneath the car, you do up the nut on the bottom of the steering column, and that is your steering column installed.
So what we can do now is one of the more fiddly jobs. We're going to attach the track rods to the cart. Attaching them initially to the outside is easy, but getting them in here is a really tricky job. So we're going to get to do that now. Thing to be aware of when you're attaching these is, so you make sure that this notch part is on the outside of the cart, so that when you wind these out to adjust the track width of the cart, you know you're doing exactly the same on both sides of the cart, because this one will twist out that way and this one twists out in the other direction, because they are handed threads. Okay, so if you're ever struggling to get one of these inside a new track rod, it's probably because you've got the wrong thread end on the wrong one. And that goes for the nuts on here too. So for this fiddly little job, we're going to move over to Alex Cam. So we're going to grab our track rod. We're going to grab the shorter one of the two screws. We need two of these things, which are little top hat washers, and we need a spacer to go on top. Okay, so washer goes on. Now obviously make sure we don't have the notched end, because this shorter screw bolt is going on this end. Put it in there, put those two bolts in there. We need 10mm nut. So washer with this thinner bit faces the bearing. That goes there. Now this is super fiddly. It'll take you multiple attempts to do it.
So what I actually found was a better way to do this, which is you take the two little bits of metal either side and you can actually fillet them out a little bit. Not too much pressure, you don't want to properly fully bend them, but you have to tighten them all back up again. So if you do pull them out, it gives you a little bit of space to get all these washers back in, and then you can tighten it up and it'll pull it back together. The other mistake I made, which is why the right hand side one was easier to get in, was because I've tightened up the other side. So we live and learn, but yeah, the way to do it is you splay the two parts further away, then you can get it in and then you tighten it up. All right, awesome. Next bit.
And then we do the second one, which is the same concept. We do top in, hat facing down into the top, into there. Done. And that is the steering all set up. Lovely jubbly. One thing that is a bugbear of mine is every time this turns, it bangs. And when you've got the wheels on the end, it happens even more often. And it bangs and makes a horrible noise, can dent, and can also, in serious cases, bend your tracking rods. So, what we do, nice little trick, is you wrap a bit of fuel line around here. It's about as much as I'll need. Grab a cutter. I hope this will work. Worked. Cable tie. Stick the cable tie in here. Go around here with the cable tie in place. And then pull it tight round. Get your cable tie snips and snippity snip. And now when this moves, it doesn't hurt it. So I just had a package this morning from the wonderful JKR, who sent me a bunch of things that I'd ordered, but he also sent me a new thing to try. And considering what I've just shown you about stopping your track rods hitting your steering column, he sent me a new item. So let's take a look. So we're going to cut this off. This brand new thing that I've just put on is going to get cut off because we have something better. We have this. It's squidgy and it's round, and then that just goes on like that. Genius. Absolutely genius. Thank you, JKR. Another thing we do is to lock on the clamps. Obviously we use these clamps to lock on the front bumper. I'll obviously change the size of these and stuff depending on when I actually put the front bumper on. But what we do to make sure that these don't go walkies when you undo them, we run a cable tie through them like this. Nip the cable tie up and cut it off. And we do the same one with the other side. So that is now the full front of the chassis all built and ready to go get straightened. So now we're going to go put this in the car and head off to ASR Engineering down near Hook. See you there.
So, cart is in the car and we are off to ASR. Hey, that rhymes! I'm a poet, I didn't even know it. We are off to Hook to go to ASR, which is also the home of used OTK. They have a really good rig for jigging go-karts, and we're going to go there and we're going to talk to the team there and see what it is they do and get the results of how bent my chassis is. I mean, my kart has been in the air and has been abused over curbs over the course of the last year, so I'm assuming it's quite bent. We obviously had it at the very last round. The front bumper was scraping on the floor in the neutral driving position, and actually in the maximum ride height driving position as well. So it will be really interesting to see what the results come back and show. See you at ASR.
When I got to ASR Fabrication, Tony got straight to work. He put my car on their fancy custom built jigging table and started measuring everything. And I mean, the level of detail here is wild. He checks every key area of the chassis to get it back to the manufacturer's tolerances. Now, watching the jigging process, that's something else. The way the chassis bends is absolutely brutal, like watching your kart go through a yoga class it didn't sign up for. The diagnosis, the front of the chassis was bent upwards. You can see from the datasheet that Tony put together, it's like a karting medical report, and every customer gets one. Turns out this was probably costing me front end grip and rotation. Hopefully with the chassis sorted, the kart will feel a whole lot better. If you want your chassis jigged by Tony at ASR, all the details are in the description. And while you're there, don't forget to like this video and subscribe with the bell on so you'll know when the next episode of this kart build goes live, and it's going to be worth it.
Right, that's the front end all built up. So in the next episode we'll be Alright, that's the end of episode 2. That's the front end all built up. So in episode 3, we're going to be focusing on the middle section of the kart. So we're going to be refurbing and fitting the seats. We're going to be fitting the fuel tank and all the fuel lines that go with it. We're going to fit the steering wheel as well. And we're going to get everything ready for when we go to episode 4, which is fitting all the back end of the car. So if you don't want to miss any of that, make sure you subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell, and I will catch you next time. And if you want to see a tour of my shed by my niece, keep watching. Otherwise, I'll see you on the next one. Thanks. Goodbye.
Don't know where they've gone, but here's a tour. There's the spiders and a glove. And Alex dropped that. Wow. Auto glim. And some sugar soap. And this thing. And some spray. And some tools. And that's been scratched because somebody wasn't driving correctly. Goodbye.